Our presenters today are our Manager of Construction Services, Mr. Vince Daniele, and our Construction Sales Specialist, Mr. Matthew Hoff. So Matthew, I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor over to you.
Thank you so much. Vince, since you're first on my screen, would you like to give yourself a quick little intro and then I'll follow?
Yeah, absolutely. So welcome everyone. My name is Vince Daniele. As Lori mentioned, I've been with Imaginet for 15 years and I am our Manager of Construction Services. Prior to Imaginet, I worked in the industry for design and construction, dealing with model-based workflows back in late 2000s, 2008 to 12 before I became a solutions consultant here at Imaginet. I'd say overall my specialty here is advanced consulting. So over the years I've worked with many clients and gone through a number of different, solved a number of different problems and come up with a lot of different implementation plans and just really a focus on adopting the ever-evolving technology that we support here at Imaginet. And one fun fact about me, just through all of my travels over the years with Imaginet, I've had the opportunity either through work or just on vacation going with friends to attend 19 different MLB venues. Unfortunately, some of those have been closed down, but it's one thing I feel like makes a kind of a unique fun fact. So I will pass it back to you, Matthew. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So as everyone can see on the screen, I'm a lot newer to Imaginet than Vince is. I've been here for 11 months now. But through my tenured experience in construction and in construction technology, I have roughly about 17 years experience from either selling technology or consuming and kind of managing the process, if you will, from a general contractor's perspective. Because of my BIM BDC background, my kind of specialty or where I really excel in is kind of model-based workflows. So coordination definitely within my wheelhouse to talk about. And then my fun fact is I actually started out my career as a surveyor. I went to school for graphic design, didn't stick with that, and got into construction surveying. So that's how I got here and located in Fort Myers, Florida, so enjoying the beautiful weather right now. As Lori mentioned earlier on the call, when Vince and I sat down to kind of map out some workflows that kind of connect, model-based workflows through field and beyond, we started out with one agenda, kind of long agenda, and decided it would probably be best to break this into two parts. So that's why the second part will be in February. And so for the agenda today, I'll kick it off with some model coordination conversations. We'll go through a PowerPoint of just some admin kind of why behind some of the functionality in the platform. Vince will take it over with asset conversation. We'll switch into a demo, kind of a live demo of walking through the process. And then we'll end it there for some Q&A, and then on February we'll kind of revisit, the asset conversation, and then bring that conversation into a work plan from a kind of a scheduling planning workflow. So with that being said, one of the when I was in the industry, one of the biggest issues for a coordination standpoint was just file consumption. Where are they located? How are you federating models, and how are you sharing that information? And one of the biggest, ACC in general, addresses a lot of issues, but one of them is that just the document management side, file management side. And so when we talk about model coordination, there are some aspects of it that need to be set up prior, right, to take full advantage of the situation. And coordination spaces are one such aspect of model coordination that can be kind of confusing at first glance. And there's multiple ways to use this. And so I kind of think of it as, you can have a main coordination space where everybody, you're doing your clash detection, you're doing your issue management. but you can also set these coordination spaces up to be used in a multi-campus setting. So if you have multiple buildings that you're coordinating, each coordination space can be its own building. You can have private versus public coordination spaces that no one else sees. So if you want to just do some preliminary clashing just on your own term, you can set up your private coordination space, and it won't affect anybody else. And so that's the key to the coordination spaces, is whatever workflows you're doing within those windows or spaces, if you will, it's not affecting everybody else's models and what they're seeing. And then the other way I look at it too is giving trade partners, subcontractors, design professionals, everybody maybe their own kind of sandbox space where they can go in, do some preliminary clashing, move models around, see what it's going to affect, and come to the table with a better, cleaner model, right, to make the situation just more effective for everybody. And so as you can see on the screen, just some little admin here, create the space, point to the main folder space on Docs where your files are located. And then number 3 there, auto clashing. That's really important. So the auto clashing is an efficiency gain to the process where you're not setting up a clash detector, going through rules. It just finds all the clashes for you. But if you want to take this workflow, let's say into like a Navisworks for more robust clashing, you could just turn the auto clash off. Those files will populate much faster, and then you can just open them up in Navisworks. So along the same lines of spaces being very flexible, part of another issue with just coordination in general is the file types, duplicate geometry, depending on if you're dealing with design files and fabrication files, DWGs, IFCs. And so with the ability to point to exactly the files that you want when you're building your coordination space, it provides a lot of flexibility to ignore DWGs if they are not needed for the coordination aspect, to add in, like an IFC from a different folder structure that wasn't necessarily allocated in your folder tree. And so it removes the duplicate data from your coordination. It allows you to identify which file types again. So you might have DWGs in the same folder as an IFC or a Revit, depending on how you're sharing and consuming information. So you need those duplicate files in there. You can just say, hey, I only want the IFCs, I only want the DWGs, or for this, I only want all the Revit files. And as you can see there, in the below here, all the unsupported files will be denoted, so you know that they're not contributing to the aspect of coordination as well. And then Bridge, if you're not familiar with ACC, Bridge is a really powerful tool of sharing files between projects. So if you happen to be working with someone else who is also in ACC, you can just bridge your files back and forth to the predetermined folder for coordination purposes. Automatic clashing. So this is probably where model coordination really shines from maybe like a Navisworks workflow. I know there's a lot of people out there who are probably very in-depth with how to set up, let's say clash detective and rules and regulations, but it is time-consuming nonetheless. And so being able to immediately upload files into model coordination, and within, depending on how large and the level of detail the models are, you can get clashes almost immediately. And what I'm showing on screen here is what we call like a clash matrix. And so inevitably what it does is takes all of your files that you have denoted for coordination, clashes them with each other, so a one-to-one clash, and then you can just see from a visual standpoint what files are causing a lot of issues. And so I thumbed up 4 clashes from my electrical to I think that's duct, right? And then I thumbs down the duct to structure. One, because it's creating a lot of clashes, 409, that we need to then, immediately click on and kind of go through the kind of workflow of just determining what needs to be addressed, what can be considered a non-issue, and maybe what's not pertinent because you haven't been to that side of the building yet. And so it just quickly gives you, you know, the ability to identify concern, you know, areas of concern upfront. Issue management, like other workflows in ACC, issue management is pertinent to collecting metadata that you can then use in-stream and downstream, right? So being able to, you know, click on an issue and capture, you know, status. You can put in metadata like, you know, is this a high priority issue? Is it a low priority? Is an RFI needed? Is there going to be a schedule impact? All of those aspects can then be not only accounted for, but then tracked, right? So when we talk about reporting later on, you can start reporting on some of those aspects. The ability to kind of link an issue to references as well. So this could be anything from site coordination issues. So something got installed wrong, it's in the wrong location, take a photo, attach it to an issue, to, you know, the tried and true workflow is not enough room between structure and ceiling. We need to RFI whether we can redesign the system or lower the ceiling. So being able to capture that RFI, link it to the issue, and have that true kind of history, right, of cradle to grave is really important. And then, as I mentioned, you know, with reporting, the more information we put into the process, the more flexibility we'll have downstream to filter and report on the information that's needed for the specific task at hand. Meetings is another tool in ACC that is a part of model coordination and build that I think could use a little bit more love, specifically when we're talking about coordination process. I've been in part of many coordination meetings, you know, running through a Navisworks model, creating viewpoints and sharing out an NWD. It's not very effective, right? There's a lot of less accountability, we'll just say, right, in tracking issues and following up. Oftentimes you come back to the meeting, not much was done that you were expecting, right, and you kind of take half the meeting to regroup and then move along, and it just prolongs the coordination schedule, which, as we know, doesn't really work because the schedule is what it is. So you just truncate everything to the back end. And so with meetings, you have the ability to set agenda items. As you can see on screen, you can reference, again, like install, you know, documentation, sequencing plans. You know, if you're doing, you know, like concrete work, you can assign these agenda items out and track them. And so I think it really, you know, sets the stage for buy-in, right, on all parties, and then creates that transparency to be able to track and you know, identify potentially trade partners or you know, modelers who need a little bit of help. Yeah, identifying that early on is always key. And then finally, you know, I talked about issues or insights and reporting. So insights is the kind of my dashboard that everybody should kind of put as their home page whenever they log into ACC, because it just gives you the quick insights to the project that you're on. Project issues, RFIs, you know, if you're working the PM field workflows, you know, project submittals as well. And the ability to just click on an issue, go straight to the model coordination, that's a huge time saver. And then on the right, creating reports. So as a VDC manager or someone in control of the coordination process, this is really key to identifying all of the potential open issues that are past due, or, you know, per the level or area or building that you're coordinating. Send out those reports, schedule it so it's automated. That way everybody gets the same report, everybody knows what's on their, you know, in their ball and court for the week. And then everybody comes to, hopefully, to the meetings much more prepared with less ambiguity of what was asked of them. And so again, just promoting transparency and accountability in the process, and, you know, making the data work for you. I think with that, I will turn it over to Vince.
Cool, thank you, Matthew. And I'll take out or I'll start talking about our transition here into model assets, well, as well as data assets. So something that I wanted to focus on in this presentation is something I still feel like is an underutilized or overlooked tool within Autodesk Build. And unfortunately so, because in my opinion, this tool is the assets tool is one of the most versatile areas of all of the construction cloud. Okay, but yeah, anyway, as I was mentioning, the assets tool, I think really is one of, if not the most versatile tool across all of the construction cloud. It might not be something that you have to touch every day, at least not throughout the course of construction or through the life cycle management of the project, but it is definitely something that I feel like has a place for really from even in design to design handover to construction, and then probably even more importantly, if you're in the position of an owner developer, if your contractors and your design teams are following an asset protocol and asset workflows, owner developers can benefit from those teams inputting data and really logging information into the assets tool for operational purposes, for building lifecycle management, and just to tie something, having a common data point that you can quickly access that has all of the kind of the historic data and information associated to any particular asset within your buildings. So just really quick with this slide, we really do have two primary methods of bringing our assets into our ACC projects. And the one that we're really going to focus on during this part one of the presentation is utilizing the model assets. So getting back to what Matthew was talking about with model coordination and the importance of that from a BDC perspective, if we transition that into the management of assets from the model, ACC and in particular Autodesk Build allows us to directly map assets, and not just from Revit files, but also from Navisworks and even DWGs. So model data from those different digital formats into the asset tool within Autodesk Build. And from there, I'll talk about some of the key points and that we really have full control and customization around what we're trying to track and how do we track that, and some tools to make this really easy. Beyond mapping our model assets, we can also create what I like to just call data assets. For lack of a better term, it's just a data row that can be added to your project for managing maybe something like a soft asset or personnel on the job. So I mentioned that this tool is extremely versatile, where we can tie things directly to our model, but we can also, I've done this for some clients where they just wanted to have a more manageable or more customizable contact list for the project. And instead of just storing that in an Excel sheet and then storing it in the document section in ACC, the file section of ACC, you can create your whole contacts list as an asset category, and that allows the project manager to input phone numbers, websites for companies, you name it, you can add it and you can manage it. And there's some really nice export and import capabilities into the assets tool as well. Next slide, please. All right, and I mentioned my common theme for today is this versatility of the assets tool. One of the things that enables that versatility is the customization and the level of customization that we can do within the assets tool in Autodesk Build. Three main areas where we can create customization for assets, and those are asset categories. So if you're trying to organize assets into different main categories and subcategories, you have the ability to group things that way, and you can create your custom tree or hierarchy of assets throughout your project. We can also create custom fields. So if there's a certain data point that doesn't exist or it doesn't tie to an asset out of the box with Autodesk Build, we can create custom attributes and custom fields that are associated to the assets. things like just text inputs, drop-down menus. I'll point out when I do the live demo, there's a few others that we can include as a custom field, but some really good stuff there. And not only can you create custom fields, but you can dedicate certain sets of custom fields to the categories that they're relevant to. So if I wanted to have a custom field for an electrical component, but not have it associate to mechanical equipment, then we don't have to. We can very specifically say, this thing is going to report my voltage, and on a door hardware asset, we don't want to have voltage, so we don't need to have that custom field. And then the third item that we can customize within assets are the statuses. So a status just indicates when you're managing these things throughout the project. Let's take an example of field management. If I want to notate what step of the construction process a particular asset is in, and that could be anywhere from, hey, have we ordered this for fabrication? Is it in process of fabrication? Has it been shipped? Has it been delivered? Has it been installed in the project? And even the out-of-the-box default status set has a lot of nice statuses for managing the commissioning of the assets for the building. So I'll point that out during the live demo portion, which is coming up in a moment. But I do like to emphasize that assets can be really, really customized and modified for really a lot of different uses. And then in addition to the customization, once we have an asset data point within our project, either derived from the model or created as a data asset, we are able to reference a whole lot of information that already exists or has been created from in our project environment to that asset. Some of the key important areas, obviously files, if we have things like cut sheets or specification documents that we want to associate to an asset, or maybe even a better example of closeout documentation. If you're running your O&M manuals and your warranties through a submittal process, once that submittal is approved, we can associate that closed submittal and all of the attached document from that submittal directly to an individual asset or to groups of assets. So again, making things really easy to search and navigate and find, not only in the field, but also at the desktop. That list on the right, add references, just indicates all of the different areas within ACC that we can associate to an asset. So if you just pause and think about all of the different applications of this, we can use assets as a common data point to really connect all of these different items within our ACC projects. Again, not even just during the design and construction lifecycle of the project, but also into operations. So as an owner developer, this stuff becomes extremely important and critical. If I wanted to look at the approved O&M manual or check out a warranty document that's associated or created in the project, instead of having to search through my submittal log or try to find a file that's buried in a folder structure, I can just find that asset, pull it up, and get all of that information right from it. And then beyond that, I do like to point out that I mentioned statuses and customizing status sets in the previous slide. Another thing that we have an opportunity for, and I think this is just kind of like a visual reference, more or less, but if we want to see in a visual sense within the project, if we're mapping our assets to the model, then as soon as we change a status on an asset, it will start to color code the view in your large model viewer in ACC to show that, hey, those yellow things are a certain, I think I marked those as ordered, the blue items have been installed. So you start to get a visualization of just work complete within that design model. And last but not least, Matthew had this in his coordination slide as well with the dashboards. But because Autodesk, the ACC projects really do serve as a database of information, anything that we're storing, including those custom fields and custom statuses that we tie to assets, we can develop very robust and individualized dashboards via Power BI to do some really nice reporting that is dynamically updated. So we tie our Autodesk data source to something like a Power BI dashboard. We refresh that or have a scheduled data extraction within our project, and it's going to update the dashboards. You can go as frequently as daily. So for stakeholders in the projects, or maybe your client, you want to share this information just so that they have visibility of where you're at within the project, or for any particular item that you're grouping in assets, you can customize the dashboards. The screenshot that I have here is actually one that Autodesk has included directly in ACC. So this is just a Power BI. I would call this an out-of-the-box template that gives us some asset information. But again, if you're familiar with Power BI, we have a pretty robust database of information that we extract from ACC, and we can use that data to really customize the look, the feel, the data points that we're reporting in a BI dashboard, and we can filter it down based on the groupings and everything that we build into our assets. And I think that was my part on assets. I'll pass it back to you, Matthew. I know you wanted to start with the coordination demo in a live environment, and then we'll get into the asset stuff after that.
Okay, can you confirm you see my screen correctly?
Yes.
Okay, so if we take all of what kind of was just proposed through the PowerPoint into a kind of fictitious situation, you got to start somewhere, right, with uploading files into Autodesk Docs, because that's where all of these workflows basically pull from. And so the folder structure is going to be no different than what anybody is probably accustomed to building out, you know, on SharePoint, local hard drives, in other platforms as well. And so ideally, you would separate coordination models from, let's say, your design models, to remove that duplication rate of models. And then so once you have your folder delineation set up, then you would upload your models to the respective folders. And just a couple things to point out. There is a robust level of permissions with Autodesk Docs and ACC in general. So from, you know, viewing just a view only all the way up to kind of full folder control. And another interesting aspect that might be relevant to like a coordination workflow is oftentimes we're always waiting for the updated models, so we can run our class checks and you know, get the updates. Yes, model coordination, as soon as those models will update, will automatically clash for you, but it's still nice to know when models have been uploaded. And so by subscribing to a folder, you can get pinged when a certain model or a folder is updated. And so that's kind of nice. From a settings standpoint, we talked about coordination spaces. And so this is paramount to starting the process. You have to be able to pull models from your folder structure. I was talking about in my PowerPoint of, you know, having a main coordination space where the issues are created, the content, the metadata is being accounted for. But you can always come in and say, hey, you know, I want to give the mechanical contractor like a sandbox for them to come play around in, right? I'll try it again. Let's see. Yeah. So if I name it mech coordination sandbox, then I can come down here, grab that coordination space. I can select the content. So again, this is where it comes into the flexibility value of saying, hey, I don't need to see the MEP files. Well, probably you would, but maybe I don't care about reports. I don't need the DWGs because that's civil content. And then over here, you have the ability to say, hey, I only want to see Revit, right, coming into my coordination space. I don't need to see the DWGs. I don't need to see IFCs. And then obviously the unsupported files won't show up anyways, but it just gives you flexibility and visibility into what you're coordinating. And then once you set up that sandbox space, the trade partners can come in there and wreak havoc and create issues and clash tests and go through their kind of the rigmarole of clash detection and come back to the table in the next coordination meeting with hopefully a cleaner model, identifying issues early on that are kind of no-brainers, that you don't need someone telling you to you can't hit structure, for instance. So that's kind of the beauty of the coordination space. And again, the auto clashing, just turn that off if you don't want that automatic clashing, and you maybe want to do these workflows in Navisworks instead. We talked about the clash matrix. I'll just touch on this real quick. So right now, pretty robust. So actually, if I go to my models, you'll kind of see for this fictitious project, I have all of it's kind of 2 buildings connected into levels, and then have each trade separated out that way through Revit, through the views and publishing from Revit. If you notice, if I change to a different coordination space, it loads different models, right? So this is that aspect of giving everybody kind of a space, a safe space, if you will, to operate out of. And so if I go back to model coordination, you kind of see why the clash matrix is built the way it is. It's very cumbersome. There's a lot of information here. But if you have views set up, so if you take all of those models, all the level 1s, all the level 2s, and create your coordination levels, right? So if you're doing areas, if you're doing a full building, you can still do a full building, but however you're coordinating, it allows you to filter this data down to, okay, now we're only focusing on level 2. I only care about level 2 models for right now. Then I can actually see the big offenders, and right. So if I structure and plumbing, if I click on that, it's actually going to load those 2 models and show me all of the clashes that are already pre-clashed, right, for me. And so at this point in time, if I only cared about these 2 models with no context of anything else, I could go through the issues, the clashes, and assign out. Or if I want to see everything in context of the other models, I would probably go into my predetermined views and then launch the level, right? And so this is going to load all of my federated models together and still give me that auto clashing. And so now that I have my model loaded, I can see what's in here. So I have electrical, fire, pipe, plumbing, structural, and duct. I can add more levels so that I always get, whenever I set up my clash as levels, it's always the conversation of, well, I want to see below or above levels as well in context. And you certainly have that flexibility at any time. You can come in here and select models and load in the rest of the levels if you want. So you certainly have that flexibility to see anything above or below. But then if I go down to the clashes, this is where early on in model coordination, it was somewhat was actually very different than Navisworks. But there has been more and more features added into the functionality of model coordination to kind of really bridge the gap, if you will, of like what BIM 360 Glue used to be back in the day, to now a very robust platform that you easily could spend all your coordination efforts in here and potentially not even touch Navisworks until it's needed, maybe like on a hospital or really coordination heavy project. And so I have the ability to, well, first, if I select my model, so if I want to select structure, I can select structure versus all, or I can, again, just focus on a couple of models. And then once I do that, then I can save that as a clash check. So then I can just go back to my structure versus duct. If I have some kind of a tolerance, if I want to give it, a ½ inch of tolerance, I can do that. Or I can just do a hard clash at 0. And as you can see, it found 28 clashes in 11 groups. And it's right now grouped by object name. I can come in here and change it if I don't want the object name. For instance, if you're dealing with Revit models and maybe you have like a shared parameter under identity data or something, you want to group by that, you could. You have a lot of flexibility on how to group the clashes. And so after you have identified clashes, it's as easy as clicking on the clash. And in this instance, it's looks like an electrical box just resting, against a column. And so that, in this case, is not an issue. And so, we can say, hey, that's a valid interface, and just say non-issue and clear that clash out. And so if I go back to a different level real quick, I'll show you the difference of doing it, versus one at a time versus, let's say I would just want to do structure versus all and get everybody all at the same time. And the value for this and what's kind of a little bit different and hard to do in Navisworks is having an element that is offending by multiple disciplines. So like a structural beam where fire protection is hitting it, plumbing's hitting it, maybe ducts clipping it as well. Being able to address that all at the same time versus finding all of those clashes one at a time and addressing them separately. It's really powerful, especially if this one trade can move and alleviate all of those clashes. You can save a lot of time. The other aspect is, let's say in this case, as you see, there's 274 clashes, there's 110 floor clashes. So if we know we're not coordinating floor penetrations, this is a non-issue for us. Again, with that non-issue button, I can clear out 110 clashes from one click. And now if I go back to my clashes, it should update. So now we're down to 164. So you can see conceivably as you go through the coordination process how much faster this could be to identify really the main issues, clear out the non-issues, and get to the meat of the issues. Another aspect, I don't think in this one I don't have a viewpoint, so I will change to coordination level 3. Viewpoints are really nice. Actually, I want to go to level 1. My apologies. If you have areas of concern that are coordination heavy, like a mechanical room, rooftop, those sorts of scenarios, you can always come in here and create those viewpoints and save them, right? So you can come back to those spaces for coordination purposes, for sharing out, and have that saved, just like you would in maybe a Navisworks or a third-party workflow as well. So really powerful there for sharing out specific areas of need that you come back to frequently throughout the coordination process. One last thing before I move on, check on time. Oh, I'll hurry up here. The ability to save the docs. So this is connecting, office to field. So a lot of times these coordination models are really important to have in the field to validate as install is progressing. And so as you save to docs, it saves into a folder that you designate, and it'll save a snapshot of that coordination model that can be viewed on the mobile app. So there really is no mobile side to the model coordination, and that's where docs is really utilized out in the field. Quickly touch on meetings. This is something that I struggled with when I was in industry of documenting, tracking, holding people accountable for getting clashes resolved on time, and not coming to the table with silly clashes that are no-brainers. And so the ability to set agendas for meetings and then be able to pull from issues that are created, assign, so I can assign Vince to, hey, you need to provide a shaft coordination update next week. That's ongoing. We have an RFI that we're tracking. We're still waiting on information. Let's say hangar days, we already supplied that, right? So we're going to close that out. And so now if I go back to meeting and go back to my coordination meeting, let's say this is the next week, and we're having a follow-up meeting today, any closed items will fall off, right, of your meeting agenda, right? So you can easily track what's been accounted for, what's new, what are we still tracking. So it's really a transparent way of coordinating, keeping track of all of the issues. You can attach references, right? So if you have schedules that you want to share, again, I go back to sequencing, install sequencing, drawings can be shared. So everybody has everything. There's no unambiguity of what's being asked throughout the process. Just quickly touch on reports, because I know Vince might as well towards his end, but being able to create these issue reports and send them out is paramount. You can create issue detail or summary reports, but I think where it's really powerful is the ability to schedule these reports. And so the low-hanging fruit is identifying, hey, what kind of issues are we tracking? Open issues, past due issues, issues for level 2, right? You can filter to all of that level, but scheduling it out. So every say, every Monday at 6 a.m., right? I want this report to be created 6:30, 6:30 we'll say, created and shared, right? So now I can share it with my stakeholders, the trades, my PM, foreman, superintendents, anybody who wants to see how many issues are being created, what kind of issues, like priority level, schedule impact issues. I can create this and have it sent out every week for them. And I think that's really where it becomes powerful is the automation side of the reporting. And then dashboard and insight builder real quick. So show this in the PowerPoint. This is just really easy to see what issues are in here. If you're a trade partner or part of the coordination process, you can come in here and say, show me my issues that are assigned to me. Again, if you have RFIs to the process, have visibility to that. And then the insight builder. So Vince, error, I'll try refreshing the page. I had this open, so it might have errored on me, but being able to just get more flexibility in your reporting on the issues. This is kind of a Power BI less dashboard, so it doesn't require the use of Power BI. It's all still within the construction cloud, but as you can see, just a ton more flexibility in what's being reported across projects or even through the project itself. And with that, Vince, I know I'm running long, so I'm going to stop and give you the screen so you can go through assets.
Awesome. Let's see here. I think jumping into assets, I'll try to make this short because I want to make sure we get a little bit of time for Q&A, although I've been monitoring the question panel and it doesn't look like anything's coming in yet. So if questions do pop up as I'm going through my stuff, make sure you enter them there so we give ourselves a little bit of time at the end to answer any of your questions. Transitioning over into the assets tool within the Autodesk Construction Cloud, specifically Autodesk Build. So for those of you that maybe are very new or have not made the decision to adopt the Autodesk Construction Cloud, Autodesk Build really contains all of our, I'll call it our construction project management tools. And this assets tool is only available in Autodesk Build. So one of the benefits, though, of the entire ACC environment is that we can connect our data between the design side and the coordination side that Matthew is showing, and we can transition that into the project management piece, and as I've been mentioning, the operations piece as well. One of the key elements of that is leveraging those model assets and being able to map them. So very quickly, I want to show just the process. It's so easy to pull your model assets into this environment to create a data point that's manageable by your project management teams. I've already pre-set up a couple of categories here. So I'll just navigate first off into our categories. So I was just using sort of the division codes to just highlight a couple of them, HVAC and electrical, and then I just created a custom one that I wanted to show called rented equipment. But as I mentioned in the PowerPoint, we have the ability of creating subcategories within these items. So if I wanted to highlight, this is mechanical equipment, I could highlight different devices, different controls, whatever you want to categorize from your assets. You can create your own customized hierarchy and how you want to organize and manage the assets. And if we're looking at extracting model elements from those Revit models and tying them to those categories, for this example, I mapped a number of assets, mechanical equipment, and I did some lighting fixtures that were included in the NEP model, and I mapped 1,200 or so assets. This model obviously has a lot more than 1,200 families that we can map. So just really quickly, and I might not go all the way through this process because we're getting a little short on time, but from this MEP model, if I want to manage assets, kind of walks us through a little wizard here. I'd say, hey, you know what, for electrical, so far I've mapped all of my lighting fixtures and I've categorized these like exterior, interior, and safety lights. If I don't already have a subcategory for something like electrical power devices, then we could create a subcategory. and map it to that subcategory. Because I didn't already pre-create that, I can always move things after the fact. But for this example, what I want to do is define the rules and the parameters that I'm looking at from the Revit model and how I want to derive and extract those families to create managed assets within our project. So there's a whole lot of metadata that is extracted from the Revit model itself. So if I keep scrolling, you're going to see all different types of things that are associated to the Revit families in the MEP model. If I want to make this really simple, I can search for a property, and I know this because of just through experience what the property names are. If I look for Revit category, and I say, hey, my Revit category is, so I use that conditional logic to say Revit category is, and then choose something like lighting devices. So maybe I want to do some switches, or if I look at electrical fixtures, I can pull in my receptacles. So I'll do something like that. Revit category is electrical fixtures. And if you wanted to even further refine that to pull out different assets and group them to different categories that you've predefined, you can add additional rules. So I could say Revit category is electrical fixture and, oh, I don't know, the family name or type equals, and let this load, like one of these type names here. I'm not going to worry about that for this example. I'm going to remove that additional rule. So I'll just show you really quickly here. When we say Revit category is electrical fixtures and save that. I'm not sure why that should have, I didn't click the preview button in there, but that dialog, if you click the preview button before you've completed it, it will actually give you a list of all of the families that match the criteria that you've put in there. So if we look at electrical, there were 1,500 different things that were identified as an electrical fixture. From that, those custom fields that I spoke about in the PowerPoint, we can map properties of what we've just extracted. So I've already mapped some different things on the ones that I preset before this presentation. But for the electrical fixtures, if I go into map properties, this gives us some control. This is the asset field that exists within the construction cloud, and we can map that to a physical property that's extracted from the Revit model. The default here name is a little funny. It includes the GUID from the Revit model. It's a little bit messy, so I like to actually break that up. I just like to have the Revit family name. So I'll actually search here, Revit family name, map to name. And then if we have a description of that family, we can turn that on and look for description field. There's all types of descriptions. Probably the identity data description is the most common. And then if we did have locations mapped and set up within our project, we can automatically, and this would require, so this is a really important one and it's really useful, but this would require that the room data is present within the model that you're mapping in order for us to then use those locations to create our location tree within the ACC project. But if we follow the right protocol and process there to create our locations in the ACC project from the Revit model, then we can actually look based on the room data point from the family where that asset is located in the Revit model, and that will automatically give us the location. I didn't have time to go through and manipulate my MEP model to copy the rooms in, so I don't have that set up for this example, but it is possible that you can have it automatically linked to the location. And then for something like barcode, if an item has a barcode or a QR code associated to it, or if you wanted to print off a list of QR codes and stick them to assets in the field when they're delivered or when a skid is created, you can use barcodes to track these assets, either based on location or if it's directly associated to the asset, we can associate a barcode to the asset. And that's what this refers to. So if my asset, like lighting fixtures, mechanical equipment, already have a code value to them that's created from the Revit model, then we can link the barcode. I like to just use the Revit element ID because we know that that's always going to be a unique value across all of the Revit families, not just the ones we're mapping. So this is always going to give us a unique value, which I like. And then when we map those properties, review the changes. Okay, it takes a second here to apply the changes. But basically in this preview, you can see for the electrical fixtures that I just mapped, hey, we're going to populate the barcode, the description, and the name of the asset, and then we can apply that. All right, my total number of mapped assets jumped from 1,200 to 2,700. And now in the assets view here, the grid view of assets, if I go into electrical, there's all those receptacles that I just mapped. This is where it gets really fun. Depending on how much customization you're doing, and I'll go into the ones that I've mapped custom fields to, but just to proof this out, you know, I did this during the demonstration. Here's my 240 volt receptacle. Yeah, if we did have locations mapped, it might give us some more insight in where that thing is located. But to show you the power of this, I can take an individual asset, click on it, and in the detail flyout, all of those fields, we can edit them directly. So if I wanted to add a description to it that didn't pull from the Revit model or overwrite the description from the Revit model, we can do so. We can specify location. I don't know exactly where this one is located yet. But the most important thing when we're using model assets and we're mapping model assets, this links us to the actual RVT that this was derived from. And when we select that hyperlink, it opens up our model view, hopefully in a nice 3D view, and it will zoom in directly to that receptacle. Within the model, so there it is. It might not seem like it, but the status of this is called specified, so it means this receptacle is spec'd in the project specifications. It's kind of a standard, like the default initial status with the default status set. But if I wanted to click on that and say, hey, those receptacles in that particular room, let's say those were installed, it's going to change the color of this. And if I zoom out a bit, we should be able to see all of the different elements that I've already preemptively associated statuses to. So we have a bunch of mechanical equipment that I labeled as ordered, got some light fixtures in here that are labeled as installed. So this gives us a decent visual of the project model, kind of indicate, and like Matthew was showing, we can set up different views and have different saved views to filter down to elements. We can even do that in this assets view. So if I wanted to say, hey, the category is just, I just want to see my electrical, I can filter down to that category and it's going to hide all of my mechanical stuff. And I don't know if I just, oh, why the light fixture status stuff got removed. Maybe I filtered down. Oh, I didn't include the lighting thing. So there's probably one little blue receptacle in here somewhere that shows that it's installed. But you can use this as a visual reference to just kind of see what the progress of all of these mapped assets are. And if you're utilizing this, if your field teams are utilizing it properly, there's a lot you can do here. There's a lot more that I want to show, but I realize we're 3 minutes from 2, and I want to make sure that if there are any questions, that we have a minute to address them. Probably what we'll do in part 2, I'll just kind of tee this off. Let's see. Doesn't look like there are any questions, so I'll just wrap up this portion now in respect of everyone's time. And I'm going to do this from this current slide. The presentation's going on my other monitor, so I'm not going to change it. But basically, yeah, for part 2, what our plan was is we're going to follow up with these workflows and tie all of this model, these model elements and this model management into a work plan. So actually tying this through schedulable and task-driven items So that will be the focus on part 2. But since there's still a few things I wanted to demonstrate and show with assets, we'll probably lead off that part 2 with just the conclusion on the assets portion, and then we'll roll that into the work plan stuff that Matthew and I plan on showing. So if this is interesting to you, part 2 is really closing the loop on this coordination chaos that we all have to deal with, and hopefully you get to see the big picture, kind of the life cycle management from design coordination, model coordination into the asset management, and then managing those assets through a work plan that's associated to the timeline of the project. So we'll incorporate things like precursors and predecessors to those work plans. We can associate items based on their status to those work plan items. So Matthew and I have a really good plan in place for part 2, which is occurring February 4th. So if you are free, we encourage you to register for part 2 of this. And I believe Lori will wrap us up here, but I think this part will be recorded and shared to our website.
Awesome.